This necklace, it's the only thing I have left of my mother.
What happens when a multi-billionaire, a woman who commands boardrooms and moves markets with a single phone call, breaks down in a humble diner? It's not the collapse of a merger or a stock market crash that triggers her tears, but a simple, tarnished silver necklace worn by a waitress scraping by on meager wages. This isn't simply a tale of stark contrasts in wealth. It's a story woven from a 30-year-old secret, a devastating betrayal, and a piece of jewelry holding the power to mend a fractured family or shatter it irrevocably. Follow along as we unravel the extraordinary true story of Elena Vance and the waitress who unknowingly held the key to her heart. Elena Vance was a creature of unwavering habit and meticulous precision. At 82, she ran the Vance global conglomerate with the same steely determination she possessed at 42. Her world was a realm of sterile boardrooms, private jets gleaming with antiseptic cleanliness, and hushed conversations with men who managed fortunes exceeding the GDP of small nations. Yet, once a month, she defied her own rigorously structured routine. She would dismiss her chauffeur, opt for a plain black town car, and visit the Corner Bistro, a quiet, unassuming eatery in a section of New York City she rarely frequented anymore. It wasn't the food that drew her, although it was passable, but the lingering ghost of a cherished memory. This was where she and her late husband, Richard, had shared their first real date. Back then, it was a struggling diner, and they were just two ambitious young people nurturing a dream born in a humble garage. Now, that garage had blossomed into a sprawling global tech campus, and Richard had been gone for a decade. The bistro remained a time capsule, and seated in her usual corner booth, Elena felt the usual suffocating weight of her life lift, only to be replaced by the heavier, sharper pang of grief. She traced the rim of her water glass, her mind drifting to Richard's infectious laugh, the way he'd playfully pilfer fries from her plate. "More water, ma'am?" Eleanor looked up, jolted from her reverie. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, stood by the table holding a water pitcher. She had a kind, weary face, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that had begun to unravel at the edges. Her uniform, though clean, showed the wear of countless hours on her feet. Elena noticed the slight tremor in her hand, a telltale sign of a double shift, the bone-deep exhaustion that clung to those who toiled for a living, not a legacy. "Yes." "Thank you," Elena replied, her voice softer than any her board members had ever heard. As the waitress leaned forward to pour the water, the lamplight above caught a glint of silver on her chest. A necklace, long and delicate, was partially hidden beneath the collar of her uniform. From the chain hung a small, uniquely shaped charm, a star, a locket crafted in the form of a 5-pointed Polaris. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her manicured hand, adorned with a formidable diamond ring, flew instinctively to her own neck, where only the crepe-like skin of age remained. It couldn't be. It was impossible. There was only one such necklace in the world. Richard had designed it himself, commissioning a master silversmith in Italy to create it for their 10th anniversary. The necklace," Elena stammered, her voice a raw whisper. The world around her seemed to distort and fade. The clatter of cutlery, the murmur of conversation from other diners, all dissolved into a low, indistinct hum. The waitress straightened, a look of polite confusion on her face. She instinctively touched the star locket. "Oh, this? I'm sorry. Is it unprofessional? I can tuck it away." "No," Eleanor said, her voice cracking. Her eyes, usually sharp and analytical, were clouded by a sudden tempest of emotion. She leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the piece of jewelry. She could discern the faint, familiar scratches on its surface, the way the chain had thinned near the clasp. "Where did you get that?" The question wasn't a polite inquiry. It was a raw, desperate demand, stripped of her usual composure. The waitress, whose name tag read Amelia, looked startled, even a little frightened by the sudden intensity of the elderly woman. It was my mother's," Amelia replied, her hand still protectively covering the locket. "It's been in my family for a long time." "Your mother?" Eleanor's mind raced. Isabella, her daughter, her beautiful, rebellious, lost daughter. The bitter argument, the slammed door, the ensuing years of agonizing silence. It all crashed back with brutal force. Elena pushed herself to her feet, her movements unsteady. The meticulously constructed fortress of her composure, built over decades of loss and ruthless business dealings, was crumbling. She reached a trembling hand across the table, not to touch the necklace, but as if pleading with the ghost it represented. "Please," Elena whispered, the sound so broken it startled them both. "I have to know. What was your mother's name?" Amelia hesitated, her brow furrowed with concern. This elegant, powerful woman was visibly unraveling before her very eyes. "Are you all right, ma'am? Should I get you some air?" "Her name," Elena insisted, her voice rising, drawing curious stares from the nearby tables. A single tear, hot and heavy, escaped her eye and traced a path through the fine lines etched on her cheek. Then another, and another. The billionaire, the titan of industry, Elena Vance, stood in the middle of a modest diner, succumbing to a heart-wrenching, silent breakdown that shook her entire frame. All because of a waitress's necklace. Amelia, stunned and overwhelmed, could only whisper the answer. Her name was Isabella. Isabella Reed. Isabella. Elena's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a cry of pure, unadulterated anguish. It was her, after 30 years of searching, of hiring private investigators who yielded nothing, of nights spent staring at an empty nursery. The answer was here, in a humble diner, around the neck of a weary waitress, her granddaughter. The ride to Elena's estate was a blur of stunned silence and disbelief. Amelia, having called a friend to cover the remainder of her shift, sat awkwardly in the plush leather seat of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, a vehicle far more luxurious than any apartment she'd ever occupied. Beside her, Eleanor Vance was a portrait of controlled grief, her eyes red-rimmed but dry, now gazing out at the city lights as if seeing them for the first time. They passed through imposing wrought-iron gates and ascended a long, winding driveway to a sprawling stone mansion that resembled a museum more than a home. A uniformed butler, a man named Charles, who had served the Vance family for 40 years, opened the door. His face was a mask of professional concern at the sight of his employer's disheveled state and her unexpected guest. "Mrs. Vance, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice a low, respectful baritone. "Everything has changed, Charles," Elena said, her voice heavy with unspoken meaning. "Please bring tea to the library for 2. The library was a room straight out of a dream, with floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves, a rolling ladder, and the scent of aged paper and leather. A grand fireplace dominated one wall, above which hung a portrait of a handsome, smiling man. Richard. Eleanor sank into a deep armchair near the hearth. "Please sit," she gestured to Amelia, who chose a stiff-backed chair opposite her, perched on the edge as if ready to flee. "Ma'am, Mrs. Vance, I don't understand what's happening," Amelia began, her voice trembling slightly. Eleanor took a deep, shuddering breath. "That necklace," she started, her gaze drifting back to the silver star. "My husband, Richard, the man in the portrait, he had it made for me. There is only one in the world. It is a locket." Is there anything inside?" Amelia's hand went to the locket. "My mother told me never to open it. She said it would only bring questions I wasn't ready for." She hesitated. Then her fingers found the tiny, almost invisible clasp. With a faint click, the star opened. Inside, on one side, was a tiny, faded photograph of a young, laughing couple. A much younger Eleanor and Richard. On the other side, an inscription was engraved in elegant script. Amelia squinted to read the words aloud. "To my Polaris, forever my guide, RV." Her eyes widened as she looked from the picture to the woman in front of her, the connection finally, impossibly, clicking into place. Tears welled up in Lelanina's eyes again. Polaris, the North Star. He always said I was his guide, the fixed point in his universe. She paused, gathering her strength. 31 years ago, I gave that locket to my only daughter, Isabella. She began to tell the story, her voice low and filled with a pain that time had not dulled. Isabella was her world, a vibrant, artistic, free-spirited girl who was the light of her and Richard's life. But as she grew older, she clashed with the rigid, high society world Eleanor was attempting to prepare her for. Then she fell in love. His name was Daniel Reed. Eleanor recounted the events, shame coloring her tone. He was a musician, a wonderful, gentle soul. But he had nothing. No money, no prospects, no name. I was afraid for her. I wanted her to have security, the life I had fought so hard to build. I forbade her from seeing him. The memory was sharp, a shard of glass piercing her heart. The fight had been terrible. Words were said that could never be taken back. "You care more about your money than my happiness," Isabella had screamed. "You don't understand love, only contracts and acquisitions." She was 22, Eleanor whispered. She packed a bag that night. I thought she'd be back in a day, a week at most, but she never came back. She just vanished. She looked at Amelia, her eyes pleading for understanding. We searched for years. We hired the best people. It was as if she had disappeared from the face of the earth. Richard died without ever knowing what happened to his little girl. Amelia listened, her own history being rewritten with every word. Her mother, Isabella Reed, had raised her alone. She had been a loving but melancholic woman who worked as a freelance artist, always struggling to make ends meet. She spoke little of the past, and never of Amelia's father or her own family. She'd always said they had died in an accident. She had passed away from pneumonia 5 years ago, leaving Amelia with little more than a box of old sketches and the silver locket. "My mother," she said, "told me my father gave her the locket before he died in a car crash. Before I was born." Amelia said softly, the lie she had believed her whole life crumbling. She said her parents were gone too. She never wanted to talk about it. Daniel Reed? Elena asked, her heart pounding. Did he die in a crash? Amelia shook her head slowly. I don't know. My mother never used his name. I only know it from my birth certificate. She was always so sad. Now I think I understand why she was alone. She cut herself off from you to be with him, and then she lost him too. The two women sat in silence, the chasm of 30 years of secrets and sorrow yawning between them. In the space of an hour, a waitress had discovered her mother was the runaway daughter of a billionaire, and a billionaire had discovered her lost child had lived and died in obscurity, leaving behind a granddaughter she never knew she had. You have her eyes, Elena said finally, a sad smile touching her lips. The same fire. She leaned forward. Do you have any children, Amelia? Amelia's guard, which had been up all evening, finally dropped. A genuine, warm smile transformed her tired face. Yes, I have a son. His name is Leo. He's 6. A great-grandson. The news was a balm on Elena's wounded soul. A new branch on a family tree she thought had withered. I want to meet him, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Amelia, I want to give you everything. Everything that should have been your mother's. Everything that is rightfully yours. But before Amelia could even begin to process the offer, the doors to the library swung open. A man in a tailored suit, bearing Elena's sharp features but none of her warmth, stood in the doorway. Beside him was a woman dripping in diamonds, her expression cold and appraising. It was Julian Vance, Elena's son and the CEO of Vance Global, and his wife, Beatrice. Mother, Julian said, his voice clipped and laced with suspicion as he stared at the waitress sitting in his family's library. Charles said you had a guest. Who is this? Julian and Beatrice Vance swept into the library like a pair of circling vultures. Julian, the younger of Elena's 2 children, had inherited her ambition, but not her sentimentality. He saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. Beatrice, his wife, was a creature of high society, her worth measured in couture and connections. Her smile never reached her eyes, which were constantly scanning for threats to her position. They both stopped short, their gazes falling on Amelia. They saw not a long-lost relative, but an anomaly, a disruption. They saw her worn polyester uniform, her cheap, sensible shoes, and the stunned expression on her face. Their eyes flickered to the tea service, then to Elena's tear-streaked face. Mother, what's going on? Julian demanded, his tone suggesting he was managing a corporate crisis, not a family matter. Who is this woman? Beatrice glided further into the room, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. She noticed the open locket in Amelia's hand. My goodness, what a commotion. You look distressed, Elena. Has this woman upset you? Her voice was smooth as silk, but laced with venom. Eleanor straightened her back. The formidable matriarch returned. Julian, Beatrice, this is Amelia Reed. She is Isabella's daughter. The statement hung in the air, heavy and explosive. Julian's face went from suspicion to disbelief, then settled into a hard, cynical mask. Beatrice let out a short, incredulous laugh. Isabella's daughter, Mother? You can't be serious, Julian scoffed. Isabella has been gone for 30 years. This is absurd. Is this some kind of joke? It is not a joke, Elena said, her voice dangerously quiet. She is wearing the Polaris locket, the one Richard gave me, and I gave to Isabella. Beatrice stepped closer, peering at the necklace with a dismissive air. A piece of jewelry, Elena, darling. That's hardly proof. Trinkets can be stolen, found, copied. This woman is clearly an opportunist. She probably heard some story and cooked up this little performance to get her hands on your money. Amelia, who had been frozen in her chair, found her voice. She stood up, her chin held high, the shock giving way to a spark of indignation. I didn't ask for any of this. I was working. Your mother is the one who dumped. Silence, Julian snapped, cutting her off with a wave of his hand as if dismissing a servant. He turned back to Elena. Mother, think about this rationally. You're emotional. A waitress shows up with a sob story and a necklace, and you're ready to rewrite your will. How convenient. How utterly transparent. This isn't about the will, Julian. This is about my grandchild, Elena retorted, her voice rising. This is about my blood. Alleged grandchild, Beatrice corrected smoothly. A claim this extraordinary requires extraordinary proof, not just a sentimental piece of silver and a convenient story. The air in the room was thick with tension. It was no longer a space of potential reunion, but a courtroom where Amelia was the one on trial. She felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. These people were looking at her as if she were dirt on their expensive rug. They weren't seeing a person. They were seeing a threat to their inheritance. I don't want your money, Amelia said, her voice clear and steady despite the pounding in her chest. I didn't even know who any of you were an hour ago. All I know is that my mother is dead and she was this woman's daughter. She looked at Elena, her expression softening. And I think she was very lonely. The genuine emotion in Amelia's voice only seemed to harden Julian's resolve. He saw it as a weakness to be exploited, a tactic in a larger game. How touching, he said with a sneer. A regular rags-to-riches fairy tale. Well, in the real world, we don't rely on fairy tales. We rely on facts, on evidence. He looked from Amelia to his mother, his eyes cold and calculating. There's only one way to settle this, a DNA test. Beatrice nodded in vigorous agreement. Precisely. A clinical, scientific, undeniable DNA test. We'll have our family lawyers arrange everything. We'll use the most reputable lab. No room for error or fraud. The word fraud was directed at Amelia like a poisoned dart. She flinched. The evening had spiraled from bewildering to terrifying. She had a son, Leo, to protect. The last thing she wanted was to drag him into this toxic world of wealth and suspicion. Elena looked at Amelia, her expression a mixture of apology and determination. They are right, Amelia. Not because I doubt you in my heart. I know who you are. But to silence everyone else. To make it official, undeniable, for your sake and for your son's. Amelia felt trapped. To refuse the test would make her look guilty, like the gold digger they accused her of being. To agree meant stepping further into this nest of vipers. She thought of her tiny rented apartment, her mountain of bills, the constant worry that kept her awake at night. Then she thought of her son, Leo, and the opportunities a life like this could offer him. Good schools, health care, a future without struggle. But at what cost? Taking a deep breath, she met Julian's icy stare. "Fine," she said, her voice firm. "Do it. Do the test. You'll see, I'm not lying." Julian gave a curt, satisfied nod. "Excellent. Our lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, will be in touch to collect your sample tomorrow." He then turned to his mother. "Until we have the results, I forbid you from giving this woman a single dollar. For all we know, this is an elaborate scam, and she could disappear the moment she gets paid. She will be staying here, in this house, as my guest," Elena declared, her authority ringing through the room. A look of fury flashed across Julian's face before he masked it. "As you wish, Mother. But don't say we didn't warn you." With a final, withering look at Amelia, Julian and Beatrice turned and left the library, their victory hanging heavy in the air. The warmth that had briefly filled the room was gone, replaced by the chilling reality of what lay ahead. Amelia wasn't just discovering a family. She was entering a war. The next few days were a surreal limbo. Amelia and her son, Leo, moved into a guest suite at the Vance mansion that was larger and more opulent than any home they had ever known. 6-year-old Leo was in heaven, convinced he had moved into a castle. He ran through the manicured gardens, marveled at the indoor swimming pool, and befriended the stern-faced butler, Charles, who found himself cracking a smile for the first time in years. For Amelia, however, the mansion felt like a gilded cage. She was a guest, but also a specimen under a microscope. The household staff treated her with a mixture of curiosity and formal distance, clearly taking their cues from Julian and Beatrice, who made their disdain known at every opportunity. Elena, on the other hand, tried her best to bridge the 30-year gap. She showered Leo with affection and gifts he was too young to understand the value of. She spent hours with Amelia, showing her old photo albums, sharing stories of Isabella's childhood, trying to piece together the life her daughter had lived. For the first time in a decade, a genuine light returned to Elena's eyes. She was rediscovering a part of herself she thought was dead and buried. "Your mother loved to paint," Elena said one afternoon, her gloved finger tracing over a photograph of a teenage Isabella with paint smudged on her cheek. "She could find beauty anywhere, in a wilting flower, a crack in the pavement." Her voice trailed off, filled with regret. "I tried to push her towards a more practical path, business, law. I didn't understand that her art was her soul. I smothered the very thing that made her special." Amelia listened, absorbing these new facets of her mother. She saw the pain and guilt that haunted Elena, and her heart went out to the old woman. A fragile bond began to form between them, woven from shared grief and tentative hope. But Julian and Beatrice were not idle. They viewed this budding relationship as a catastrophic threat to their dominion. Their inheritance, their status, their power. It was all at risk. "She's manipulating her. You see it, don't you?" Beatrice hissed at Julian one evening in their own wing of the mansion, portraying the role of the meek, grateful orphan. "And your mother, addled by grief and age, is falling for it. Hook, line, and sinker." "The DNA results will take another week," Julian said, pacing his study. "We can't just wait. We need to discredit her. We need leverage. Something to prove she's not the saint she appears to be." Beatrice's eyes gleamed with a cruel intelligence. "Everyone has secrets, darling. Especially people who have had to struggle. They get desperate. They make mistakes." She picked up her phone. "I know a man, a private investigator, Robert Sterling. He's discreet, and he's very, very good at finding dirt. Let's see what skeletons this little waitress has in her closet. Robert Sterling was a man who operated in the city's shadows. Within 2 days, he began digging into Amelia Reed's life. It was a disappointingly clean record. She worked hard, paid her bills, sometimes late, and had no criminal history. She was, by all accounts, a decent person. But Sterling was paid to find something, and if he couldn't find it, he was adept at creating it. He discovered that 2 years prior, Amelia had been in a minor car accident. The other driver, a man named Marcus Thorne, had been aggressive and claimed she was at fault. The insurance handled it, but not before Thorne had made a scene. Sterling saw an opening. He contacted Marcus Thorne, a man with a gambling problem and a perpetually empty wallet. For a few thousand in cash, Thorne was more than happy to change his story. He would now claim that Amelia had tried to bribe him at the scene, offering him cash to not call the police because she'd been drinking. It was a lie, but it was a believable one. Beatrice was delighted. It wasn't a felony, but it was enough. It painted a picture of a deceitful, manipulative person. It was a seed of doubt they could plant in Elena's mind at the perfect moment. Meanwhile, Amelia remained oblivious to the plot against her. Her biggest struggle was with her own identity. One day she was a waitress, the next, the potential heir to $1 billion fortune. The whiplash was severe. One afternoon, Mr. Abernathy, the family lawyer, a kind, elderly man with gentle eyes, requested a meeting. "Mrs. Vance has instructed me to initiate the legal process of recognizing you as her heir, pending the DNA results," the lawyer explained calmly. "This involves establishing trusts, navigating tax implications. It's a substantial undertaking." Amelia felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Trusts, taxes. These were concepts far removed from her everyday reality. "Mr. Abernathy," she confessed, "I still haven't figured out how to use the kitchen coffee machine. This whole thing feels wrong, like I'm an imposter." He responded gently, "You are not an imposter, my dear. You are family. But be warned, with a family like the Vances, that title brings as much conflict as it does comfort. Julian and Beatrice will not readily accept you." His words proved eerily prophetic. Later that day, while Amelia watched Leo play in the garden, Beatrice approached, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. "Enjoying the grounds?" Beatrice asked, her tone dripping with thinly veiled contempt. "You and your son have certainly made yourselves quite at home." Amelia responded politely, refusing to rise to the bait. "Leo loves it here," she said simply. "I'm sure he does," Beatrice purred, her voice laced with insincerity. "Children love shiny things. And you, Amelia, seem to have found the shiniest toy of all." Leaning closer, she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "A word of advice. Take a settlement. Eleanor will give you a few million to disappear. It would be enough to set you and your boy up for life. Take the money and run. Because if you stay, if you try to claim what belongs to my husband, I will make your life a living hell. I will unearth every mistake you've ever made and broadcast it to the world. You won't just lose the inheritance, you'll lose your dignity too." The threat hung in the air, a blatant declaration of war. Amelia stared, horrified but resolute. "This isn't about the money," she declared. "It's about my grandmother." Beatrice unleashed a sharp, unpleasant laugh. "Oh, you poor naive girl. You have no idea what you're up against." With that, she turned and left Amelia standing in the beautiful garden, a chilling dread settling upon her heart. The wait for the DNA results had become a ticking time bomb. The day the DNA results were expected, the Vance mansion crackled with an almost palpable tension. It felt less like a family home and more like a battlefield headquarters. Two opposing armies awaiting a critical dispatch. Eleanor had summoned everyone to the library, the very room where the drama had begun. She sat in her large armchair by the fireplace, Amelia and a quiet, nervous Leo on a nearby sofa. Julian and Beatrice occupied seats on the opposite side of the room, their postures rigid, their expressions grim. Mr. Abernathy arrived precisely at 3:00 p.m. He was a man accustomed to high-stakes situations, but even he seemed to feel the oppressive weight of the atmosphere. He carried a single, sealed manila envelope. "Good afternoon," he announced, his calm voice a welcome anchor in the stormy silence. "I have the results from the laboratory." All eyes were riveted on the envelope. It held far more than just a scientific finding. It held the future of the Vance dynasty. Julian leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair. Beatrice's painted smile was strained, her eyes like chips of ice. Amelia held Leo's small hand, her own palm slick with sweat. Mr. Abernathy carefully broke the seal and withdrew a single sheet of paper. He scanned it, his expression unreadable. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, he looked up, his gaze settling on Eleanor. The analysis compared the DNA sample provided by Ms. Amelia Reed with a sample from yourself, Eleanor, he announced formally. "The results are conclusive." He paused for dramatic effect. "The probability of grand maternity is 99.99%. Amelia Reed is, without any scientific doubt, the daughter of the late Isabella Vance Reed, and your granddaughter." A collective gasp swept through the room. Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear of pure relief tracing a path down her cheek. She reached out to Amelia, her smile radiant. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it in my soul." Amelia felt a wave of vindication wash over her. She squeezed Leo's hand and returned her grandmother's smile, a genuine, happy smile. It was real. It was finally all real. Julian slumped back in his chair as if he'd been physically struck, his face contorted in pure fury. This was his worst-case scenario. But Beatrice, ever prepared, was far from defeated. This was the moment she'd been meticulously orchestrating. "Well," Beatrice said, her voice slicing through the emotional moment like a shard of glass. "That's settled, then?" She stood, a folder in her hand that Amelia hadn't noticed before. "While we were all waiting for this oh-so-touching reunion to be confirmed," Beatrice continued, "Julian and I thought it prudent to conduct our own due diligence, to understand exactly who we are welcoming into this family." Eleanor's smile faltered. "Beatrice, what is the meaning of this? This is a moment for celebration." "Is it?" Beatrice retorted, her voice dripping with saccharine sarcasm. "Or is it a moment to face the truth? You see, Eleanor, you may have found your blood relative, but you have no idea who this woman truly is." She opened the folder. "We hired a private investigator, Robert Sterling. Very thorough." She pulled out a document and began to read. "Let's see. Amelia Reed. A string of low-paying jobs, constantly behind on rent. But this is the interesting part. 2 years ago on May 14th, a traffic accident on a Brooklyn street. The other driver, one Mr. Marcus Thorne, A chill ran down Amelia's spine. She remembered the incident, the belligerent man who'd yelled at her. According to Mr. Thorne's sworn affidavit, Beatrice continued, her eyes gleaming with triumph, Ms. Reed was erratic and smelled of alcohol. When he threatened to call the police, she offered him $500 in cash to forget the whole thing. An attempt to bribe a man to cover up a DUI. How resourceful. The accusation was a bombshell, a carefully constructed lie presented with such authority, backed by a sworn affidavit, that it sounded damningly convincing. "That's not true," Amelia cried, leaping to her feet. "He's lying. The man was a maniac. He screamed at me, but I wasn't drinking. I never offered him money." "Of course you'd say that," Julian chimed in, rising to stand beside his wife. "You're a born liar. Your whole life has been a struggle, scrambling for money. An opportunity arises, and you try to lie and cheat your way out of trouble. It's in your character." Eleanor looked from Julian and Beatrice's smug faces to Amelia's panicked expression. A flicker of doubt, a tiny, poisonous seed, was planted. She had been so blinded by hope, so desperate to believe in this fairy tale. Had she been naive? She thought of her own world, a world of contracts, betrayals, and ruthless ambition. People lied for far less than $1 billion inheritance. "Amelia," Eleanor asked, her voice faltering, "is there any truth to this?" The question itself was a betrayal, shattering Amelia's heart. Tears sprang to Amelia's eyes, tears of hurt and fury. After everything, after the DNA test, after opening her life to this family, to have her grandmother, the one person she was beginning to trust, look at her with suspicion, was too much. "You believe them?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She looked at Eleanor's conflicted face and saw that the seed of doubt had already taken root. The joy of the moment was gone, poisoned by a calculated lie. Beatrice had won this round. She had successfully transformed a moment of reunion into one of accusation and mistrust. Amelia shook her head, a profound sense of despair washing over her. "I can't do this," she said, her voice barely audible. She took Leo's hand, pulling him close. "I don't want your money. I don't want any of this." She turned and fled the library, leaving behind a stunned silence, a triumphant Beatrice, and a heartbroken old woman whose greatest hope had just been cruelly corrupted by a venomous lie. Amelia's retreat to the guest suite was a flurry of tearful, desperate packing. She threw her and Leo's meager belongings into their old, worn duffel bags. The luxurious room, which had once felt like a dream, now felt like a suffocating prison of judgment and suspicion. Leo, confused and scared by his mother's tears, simply hugged his new teddy bear, a gift from Eleanor, and watched in silence. "We're going home, sweetie," Amelia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Back to our real home." Her resolve was absolute. She could endure poverty, she could endure hardship, but she would not endure being labeled a liar and a cheat. She would not subject her son to a family that would use him as a pawn in their cruel games. The brief moment of doubt in Eleanor's eyes had severed the fragile bond between them more effectively than any lie. Downstairs, the library was a war zone of words. "How could you?" Eleanor raged at Julian and Beatrice, her own heartbreak solidifying into furious anger. "You took a moment of pure joy, and you deliberately, maliciously destroyed it." "We revealed the truth," Julian shot back, his voice rising to match hers. We are trying to protect you. This woman is a grifter. Her character is flawed. Can you imagine the scandal when the tabloids get hold of this billionaire heiress's DUI bribery scandal? It would tarnish the Vance name forever. A name you seem to care about more than your own family, Eleanor retorted. More than your long-lost niece, more than my happiness. My primary duty is to this company, this legacy, Julian thundered. Something you taught me. You can't let sentimentality cloud your judgment and put everything Richard and you built at risk for some waitress. Their argument was interrupted by a soft knock on the library door. It was Charles, the butler, his face grave. Mrs. Vance, he said. I apologize for the intrusion, but Ms. Reed has packed her bags. She is waiting for a taxi by the front gate. Eleanor's heart plummeted. She was leaving. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. She was about to lose her family all over again. This time because of her own hesitation, her own son's cruelty. She had to stop her. As Eleanor rushed from the room, Amelia was in her suite, doing one last sweep. She opened a closet to ensure she hadn't left anything behind. Tucked away on the top shelf was a battered cardboard box she had brought from her apartment, containing her mother's few possessions. She hadn't had the heart to look through it since moving in. Now, something compelled her to open it. Inside were old sketchbooks, dried paintbrushes, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed in her mother's elegant script to Mrs. Eleanor Vance, Vance Estate, New York. They had never been sent. The postmarks were all from 30 years ago. With trembling hands, Amelia untied the ribbon and began to read the first letter. Dearest Mother, she read aloud. I hope this letter finds you. I've tried calling, but no one ever puts me through. I am so sorry for the things I said. I was angry and hurt, but I never stopped loving you. Daniel and I are struggling, but we are happy. I wish you could see that. I wish you could meet him. He is kind and good. Please, Mother, just talk to me. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had tried to reconcile. She read another letter, dated a few months later. Mother, something wonderful has happened. I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. I know you must be angry with me, but I hope the news of a grandchild will soften your heart. I want my child to know you and to know his father. Daniel is so excited. We want to come home. I've left a dozen messages with Julian's assistant. Has he not passed them on? Please call me at this number. A cold dread washed over Amelia as she reread the line. I've left a dozen messages with Julian's assistant. She frantically tore through the other letters. They told a story of increasing desperation. Letters about Daniel getting sick with a rapidly progressing cancer. Letters begging for help, not for herself, but for him. And then the final heart-wrenching letter. Mother, Daniel is gone. He died this morning. I am alone, and I am 7 months pregnant. I have nothing. I called the main house again today, desperate to speak to you. Julian answered. He told me you wanted nothing to do with me. He said you told him that my choices had consequences and that I was never to contact the family again. He said you had disowned me. My heart is broken, Mother. Not just for losing Daniel, but for losing you too. I won't bother you again. I will raise this baby on my own. Goodbye. Your daughter, Isabella. The letter fell from Amelia's numb fingers. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't just a fight. It was a deliberate, calculated act of sabotage. Julian had intercepted the calls. He had lied to Isabella, telling her she was disowned. He had lied to his parents, letting them believe their daughter had simply vanished without a trace. He had single-handedly destroyed his own family to secure his position as the sole heir. At that moment, Eleanor burst into the room, her face etched with panic. "Amelia, please don't go. We can sort this out. I was wrong to doubt you. Please." Her words died in her throat as she saw the letters scattered on the floor and the look of cold, devastating realization on Amelia's face. Amelia simply picked up the last letter and handed it to her grandmother. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read her dead daughter's final words. She read about the calls, about the pregnancy, about Daniel's death. But it was the part about Julian that made her world collapse. The lie. The cruel, unforgivable lie. The son she had raised, the man she had made CEO of her company, had not only allowed his sister to suffer and die alone, but had orchestrated it. He had let his parents grieve for 30 years over a loss he himself had engineered. A low, guttural sound of pure agony escaped Eleanor's lips. The sound of a mother's heart breaking for the second and final time. She looked up from the letter, her eyes no longer filled with tears, but with a fire of incandescent rage. She turned and marched out of the room, the letter clutched in her hand like a weapon. Amelia followed, knowing this was no longer about her. This was about a 30-year-old crime that was about to be brought into the light. They found Julian and Beatrice in the main hall, smugly awaiting the problem to depart. Eleanor strode directly to her son, and without a word, slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the cavernous space. "You," she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage so profound it was almost silent. She held up the letter. "You did this. You let her die alone. You let us think she was gone. You killed your own sister." Julian's face went white as he saw the letter. The mask of control shattered, replaced by pure, cornered panic. "Mother, It wasn't like that. I was trying to protect you from her. From them. Protect me." Eleanor's voice rose to a terrifying roar. "You destroyed us. For money. For power. You are not my son. You are a monster." The truth was out. Ugly, brutal, and undeniable. The foundation of the Vance family had cracked open, revealing the rot and betrayal that lay at its core. The aftermath of the revelation was swift and brutal. In the cold light of his treachery, Julian Vance withered. His denials were weak, his excuses pathetic. Beatrice, seeing her entire world of wealth and status evaporating before her eyes, tried to distance herself, claiming she knew nothing of Julian's decades-old secret. But Eleanor was finished with them both. "Get out," Eleanor commanded, her voice devoid of all emotion save for a chilling finality. "Get out of my house. Mr. Abernathy will contact you tomorrow regarding your severance from the company and your disinheritance. You will receive nothing. You are no longer a part of this family." Julian and Beatrice stood there, stripped of their power, their future annihilated by a bundle of old letters. They left the mansion that day with nothing but their expensive clothes and the public disgrace that was sure to follow. The Vance empire had a new direction, and they were not a part of it. In the quiet that followed their departure, Eleanor turned to Amelia. The old woman looked fragile, aged by the terrible truth. Yet, There was a new clarity in her eyes. She walked over to Amelia and took both of her hands. "I am so sorry," Eleanor said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I failed your mother, and I failed you by doubting you. Can you ever forgive me?" Amelia looked at the broken woman before her, the woman who was her grandmother, and saw not a billionaire or a matriarch, but just a mother who had lost her child. All the anger and hurt she had felt melted away, replaced by a deep, shared sorrow. "There is nothing to forgive," Amelia whispered, squeezing her hands. "You didn't know. We were both lied to." That moment marked the true beginning of their family. The weeks that followed were not about lawyers and trust funds, though Mr. Abernathy handled all of that quietly in the background, officially installing Amelia as the primary heir to the Vance fortune. Instead, they were about healing. Eleanor, Amelia, and Leo became a small, tightly knit unit. They spent their days not in boardrooms, but in the gardens. Eleanor taught Leo how to play chess the same way she had taught Isabella. Amelia, discovering her mother's old art supplies, started sketching again, a talent she never knew she possessed. She drew pictures of Leo chasing butterflies, of Charles the butler secretly smiling, of Eleanor asleep in her armchair. A look of peace finally on her face. One evening, Eleanor found Amelia sitting by the fireplace, the Polaris locket in her hands. "Your mother was supposed to give that back to me on her wedding day," Eleanor said softly. "It was a tradition I wanted to start. The matriarch passes it to her daughter, who passes it to hers. It's a symbol of our guiding star, the love that leads us home." She gently took the locket from Amelia's hand. "It was mine. Then it was Isabella's. Now, Amelia, it is yours." She carefully fastened the silver chain around Amelia's neck. "Wear it not as a memory of what we lost, but as a promise of what we have found." Amelia touched the star, its cool metal a comfort against her skin. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was her history, her future, her connection to a line of strong women she was now proud to be a part of. The mansion, once a cold and intimidating palace, slowly became a home filled with laughter. Leo's shrieks of joy echoing in the halls, Amelia's quiet chuckles, and Eleanor's warm, contented sighs. The ghosts of the past had not vanished, but they no longer haunted the rooms. Instead, they were cherished memories, integrated into the fabric of a new, stronger family. Eleanor Vance, the billionaire who had everything, had finally found the one thing she truly needed: the unconditional love of her family. And Amelia Reed, the waitress who had nothing, discovered that her greatest inheritance wasn't the money, but the grandmother who had been waiting for her all along, guided home by the light of a silver star. In the end, this wasn't a story about a lost fortune being found, but about a lost family being reunited. It's a powerful reminder that the most valuable treasures we possess are not kept in vaults, but in our hearts. The story of Eleanor, Amelia, and Leo teaches us about the devastating power of secrets, the corrosive nature of greed, and the incredible healing power of forgiveness and second chances. It proves that it's never too late to right a wrong, and that the bonds of family, though they may be stretched and tested, can ultimately endure even the deepest betrayals. And if you want more incredible true life stories that will inspire and move you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.